Hello, Laura. How you doing? She's like the mist. She's faded. Can you hear me, Laura? Laura. Laura. Can you
Hey.
hear me? There you go.
I can hear you.
Welcome, everybody that's listening. I think we're having a Facebook issue, so if you're watching, please hopefully be watching on YouTube. I don't know what's going on. Facebook's being ridiculous. Just see here. I can do this for people. Make sure you go to our YouTube channel. And I think we have a few watchers, so they must be on our YouTube. Laura, it's been a month since our last time doing True Evil.
It's been a month, yeah, since our last show.
Yeah, what have you been up to?
Working, like non.
How's that
What about you?
You're back in LA? You're back out in LA?
I'm back in LA. I'm in LA, and then I'm doing we've had a ton of cases come in this week, so I've just been working like crazy. It's been wild. We've had to call the LAPD a couple times in for the investigations. It's been crazy.
Well, you know, we have a star-studded lineup tonight. I really truly believe. Even though with the social media issues, hopefully our platform is able to get out there. Internet's great, yeah. Computers are great, but sometimes, unfortunately, there are issues. But yeah, so who are our guests tonight? I know one of them you were able to bring in and you work with closely, and then one is a good friend of mine that we met many, many years ago, and he tends to have a connection to a serial killer. So who are our guests tonight?
I'll do the one and you do the other that you're close to. But we have Dr. John White on tonight. He is my forensic psychology mentor. We have been working on a serial killer study. We just presented it at the homicide conference and a forensic psychology symposium. Dr. White is a licensed forensic psychologist, and he is a professor out of Stockton University in New Jersey.
And then our other guest is what the title is based off of tonight, American Ripper, H.H. Holmes. And the individual we have on tonight, that was our primary guest, and of course, you know, Dr. John White is a little sugar, a little salt to the flavor, is Jeff Mudgett, and he is the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes himself, or Herman Mudgett, as by his true original name. And he's also the author of Bloodstains. He's appeared on, of course, the same show, American Ripper, and then also appeared on a History Channel show. I think it was the Mysteries of the Great or something like that. Sorry if I butchered that. Jeff, you can fix that for us. But yeah, no, we have two amazing guests tonight. I think we're going to be able to delve deep to who H.H. Holmes really was. You know, a lot of people, and I know there's always debate on who is the most prolific serial killer in the United States is, but you know, for the man that died in 1896, he tends to be talked about quite a bit. And if I remember correctly, and which I think we could talk about with Jeff a little bit, I don't know what his opinion of it is I know there is a TV series coming out based upon a book in 2003 that came out with maybe Leonardo DiCaprio being a part of it, if that's still true, which is pretty fascinating in itself because Leonardo DiCaprio is a great actor, in my opinion. But so let's bring Jeff on first, and then we'll bring Dr. John on. So we'll let Jeff introduce himself, who he is, what's his background, and then we'll bring our last panelist on, and we'll get into discussion. Jeff.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thank
Jim,
you.
Laura, how are you tonight?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good, good, and thanks for having me on. I enjoy your show, and I got to tell you, your intro is a great one. I enjoyed that a lot tonight. But thanks for having me on and letting me voice my opinion about
It's
this
slow.
stuff. And
It's coming.
I can't wait for you guys to give me some good questions about what's going on and any new discoveries we've made, and then Dr. John to step in and maybe lead us in the right direction on future investigations.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, one thing is, Jeff, I know I gave you a little bit of an introduction of who you are, but if people have lived in the world of the mysterious and haven't read Bloodstains or haven't watched the History Channel, or who in the hell don't know who H.H. Holmes is, which if you're watching a true crime channel and don't know who H.H. Holmes is, who are you, Jeff? And what's your background?
I was thanks for that. And Bloodstains, and I like the chance to do this because I tend to find out a lot of people are confused about what I was trying to do with my book. But Bloodstains is the harrowing tale based on a true story of me at 40 years old being told, by my family that I was the direct descendant of the closest this mankind's come to identifying the evil one, H.H. Holmes, in my opinion. And I tried to write a book about how that knowledge affected my life in an entertaining sort of way. And then while I was writing that book, Laura, I became obsessed with H.H. Holmes, the serial killer. The people, many of the historians identify him as the quote unquote first serial killer. I think we all know that's not true. There were ones before him, but that's what he's identified, the first psychopath, all those things. And then, he's the one that ran the hotel there in Chicago while the World's Fair was on in 1894, when millions and millions of people from all over the world attended and needed a place to spend the night. And that's what you were talking about, Scorsese and DiCaprio, right? Making a movie or a series, a Hulu series about that murder castle, and the devil in the White City is how Eric Larson titled his book, which was a national bestseller.
Mm-hmm. It was. And, thank you. And so, how and I want to bring Dr. John on as soon as possible, but one thing that I've always kind of like felt like, I'm an Anito. There's not many Anitos in the United States. Mudgett, it's not a common name, but it's a common name. So when you find out that you are related to H.H. Holmes, what comes to your mind? Because that's not something you probably swallow easily. It's like, I know Laura's connected to Lizzie Borden and some family ancestry. So, but still, like, how do you feel? Like, you're the direct descendant, great great grandson. It's not like you're second, fourth, the 10th millionth cousin. You're the great great grandson of H.H. Holmes, correct?
Well, yeah, and that's my grandfather's grandfather, and I think is an easier way to see it. But I immediately started wondering, Jim, and I'm interested in what the doctor thinks of this. What characteristics, what traits, what instincts, what genes, what DNA would have been passed on from this evil man, who I'm convinced wasn't psychopathic or sociopathic at all. He was just evil. And I wanted to know what had been passed on to me, and if the things that I was considering, 40 years of life over, having been different about from people around me, if he had anything to do with that. And to tell you the truth, I haven't found a lot of answers from studies, from experts, from historians about if there's an evil man like that, if there's a killer. And we can, every show I go on now, We have discussions about how many he actually killed, and I have no idea. But we're talking about 1890s, and a man who was an expert at eliminating the remains and evidence of murder afterwards, and then selling skeletons and body parts to universities around the country. I mean, to think you could actually determine with a hotel that was constructed. I mean, think of this. We think of premeditated murder, right, Laura? Think about premeditated construction.
Of course.
He actually built this hotel planning to take victims during the World's Fair, and then having a basement which would allow him to eliminate any remains or evidence and then sell what was left around the country, or to use it to fake. He made a lifestyle. He made a good living falsifying life insurance. Right. And he used to substitute bodies. And here was a very wealthy man for the time, a very wealthy man. And it was that thing about a man that evil, which when you think of it, premeditated construction of a hotel for innocent tourists, how can it be much worse than that? Mm-hmm. And then if any of that, his own quote that I include on the cover of my book, I was born with the devil in me. He has been with me ever since. I think he actually believed that. He was a prolific liar, okay? Which when people use his quotes to make their factual points or theories or concepts about him, I always kind of chuckle a little bit, because the man was playing chess with everyone around him all the time. His judge, his prison superintendent.
It's wild, because he made his own hunting grounds in that, hotel.
Yeah. Yes.
He brought his prey right in there, and that was his.
The subway train went right by the hotel. There was a stop there. They'd get off, and he'd welcome them in the front door. I mean, this was a very charming, elegant man, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen since, and may never again. And that's why you're going to find Hollywood giants like Scorsese and DiCaprio. Once they get their hands on this thing, they're going to make an incredible series of movies about him. It's going to be amazing to watch. I hope they pull it off right. I'm excited about where they go with it. And, I've seen their other movies like Gangs of New York, those things, Titanic, some of the best movies Hollywood's ever made. And this is going to be really cool to watch, I think.
Well, let's bring our next guest on. I definitely, one quote that you did say, but I also like a variation of that quote that he basically said at his execution in 1896 was, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not. The fact that I was a murderer, no more than a poet can help the inspiration to sing." I like that one too. So let's sing in praise of Dr. John White now.
All right.
Hello, Dr. John. Thank you for coming on with us tonight.
Hi, and I just want to say right up front that my connection keeps going back and forth. So I walked into several different rooms trying to get a good connection, but. So we'll see how far this goes.
Well, before we lose you, hopefully we do not. For our listeners, and then of course our watchers as well, because we are on podcast formats and YouTube and Facebook. Our Facebook, unfortunately, is giving us issues right now, so hopefully that's fixed. But for people that don't know who you are, Dr. John White, who are you? What's your background, and what do you bring to the table?
Now I'm back.
Did you hear my question?
No, I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Well, I said, which is funny, it happened. I said, for people that are listening or watching, who are you? What's your background? And explain who you are.
Well, I live in Atlantic City now, but I'm originally from Texas. I was a Dallas Police Sergeant investigator for the Dallas Police Department. I kept going to school and ended up getting a PhD. I changed my major from sociology to psychology and counseling.
It's a night of issues tonight. It's a spirit. It's a spirit of
Jim,
issues.
I have you loud. Jim, I have you loud and clear.
Well, let's see if he is able to continue. If not, we'll get into the nitty gritty. All right. Well, he's frozen, and Laura, do you want to have a question? Because I think Dr. John is frozen in time.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for about Holmes. I'd actually like to know. I don't know too much about the background of Holmes. If you could give like everybody a good background on his crimes.
He was he grew up in Gilmington, New Hampshire, in a beautiful little community with a responsible mother and father. He was Catholic. He was well taken care of. He went on to the University of Michigan, and he actually graduated with a medical degree. He could have been. This is one of the most interesting parts of the entire story to me, and what I was hoping Dr. John could jump in with. But here's this brilliant man. The stories at the university are all about how he used to show up 2 or 3 days before the exam for a class, pass it, and then not be seen again until the next exam was required. And he was off on a farm. He was working pharmacy and cadavers while the other students were in trying to be doctors. Strange man. But like I said, an evil genius who could have been anything he wanted to be at that time. He could have been a Louis Pasteur, I believe. Instead, he went this direction. And, the most extreme a human is capable of. And it's that was the thing that I was worried about, Jim and Laura, about how much of that got passed on down to me. And that's what I was trying to capture in my book.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, he moved to Chicago and became a pharmacist. It's intriguing, like the front he was able to make. Like, do you feel like the route he chose, being a pharmacist, would give him the ability of the ploys of his insurance frauds? Because that was, even though he was a murderer, and let's be honest here, he was only executed based upon one murder, instead of 27 to 23 to 200 people supposedly he killed. But you said New Hampshire, but he was captured in Boston, Massachusetts, which is 40 minutes away from me. So you feel like he picked his roles, like being a pharmacist gave him a little bit more time to be away than if he was a full-fledged doctor, and people would maybe come to realize that, well, this man's gone a lot as a doctor. Do you think he picked his ploys? Because, like you said, he was a very smart man. He was he built a castle right near the subway, and it was known as the castle. People made notice that people came in and never left. They'd never seen those people again, but he was able to get away with it. It's pretty crazy to think.
Yeah, right here in America. No, everything he did, Jim, was with the intention of identifying the next con, the next fraud, in my opinion. And that pharmacy, if you think about it, was perfection for that. He could identify someone in need of medicine for health issues or with life insurance problems, those types of playing grounds, and then plan ahead to figure out how to pull it off to make that next $10,000-$20,000, which at the time was a lot of money. And that's what his specialty was.
Dr. John, you back?
And then sell the skeletons. And then sell the skeletons too.
It's true. And to
I'll give you guys an
university.
interesting story.
Yeah.
I'll give you an interesting story. I was at a book signing in Iowa and moving some books along and assigning them to people who were interested in reading the story. And I had a very distinguished gentleman in suit and tie come up and tell me that, introduce himself as the curator of one of the medical museums at the University of Iowa. And he said that they just had a meeting, the board of directors, after reading my book, and they wanted to eliminate a skeleton that they'd exhibited there for decades, which they were all in firm belief the university had at one time bought from H.H. Holmes, and they didn't want that in the museum anymore.
Very fascinating. And Dr. John, by the way, you're muted. You're muted.
John.
He's got to unmute himself.
John, you're on mute. Can you hear us?
I think he can
he's
hear
on
us.
mute. I have him on
You're
mute
on
too.
mute.
Yeah.
He's telling us a good story right now.
I know.
I know. I'm interested.
I think the spirit of H.H. Holmes could be
Jeff,
with
how
us tonight.
many people did he allegedly kill at the hotel? Do you know?
Have no idea. I have no idea.
There must be like a guesstimate number of how many.
Well, it tends to be a debate wherever I go now. There's historians that don't want to. They want to say 9 was the number. Others say 13. Some say 27 based on a Holmes confession, which turned out to be false. And then others more and more. I always end that debate, Laura, with the question, why would it matter 9? Even if it's 9, that's pretty terrible for me. And I want to make sure the victims of the families of those victims at least hear me generate the solemn sorrow that my relative did that to them. And it's I tend to think, Laura, he was an expert at the elimination of evidence after murder. If you watched American Ripper on History Channel at all, you'll remember a part of the show where we actually went out in the Chicago River and oceanographers were identifying blocks of concrete, which the show's experts believe could have been identified with Holmes. Holmes actually owned a concrete factory along the river that never sold concrete for construction, which strangely enough tends to, raise that little flag in my head that, every time I study more and more about this evil man, something other strange comes up and it never stops. And I think that feeds my obsession, which I wish would stop sometimes, but it won't. And then, so to say for anyone to say they know how many he killed is ridiculous. I don't have any idea. I know he was a serial killer. I know he was a mass murderer. If you look up those definitions, in Wikipedia or Google, you'll see he qualifies for those, even if you take the lower numbers.
Very much so. Yeah, no, I think
was curious, what kind of what?
No, sorry, go ahead.
John, are you there? No, I was going to see if we can get John on. He's there.
He's still muted.
I know, we can't hear you.
Sorry, Jeff, for the
Maybe I'll send him a text and I'll let him know.
No, I wish I knew sign language.
Yeah. I know. Let me see.
So
what kind of torture? I remember reading about there was like a gas chamber in the hotel. He had different rooms for different things. Can you tell us any more about that, Jeff?
Well, and this is based on supposed investigations by the Chicago police and then other historians that accompanied them on these investigations. But there was a furnace in the basement which registered a tremendous high temperature, which could have eliminated human bone. There was gas in the hotel, which could have asphyxiated and killed his intended victims. And there were chemicals and supposed acid baths in the basement as well, although I've never seen any evidence of which acid it was. And you have to remember, these were investigations that occurred in 1895 with a police force. The Chicago police force was more interested, guys, in they had 50, 60, 70 people that went missing during the World's Fair, and they never located them ever again. And I think, they were quite busy with the millions of people there in the fair. And then all of a sudden, the newspapers are writing stories about this master of the murder castle right down the road from the World's Fair in Chicago. And I think it took them by surprise, and I don't know if they handled it properly, but the stories about the basement, if you read, Laura, there's a Harper's Magazine article about their investigation of the castle, which is very interesting and discusses the furnace, the acid baths, and the chemicals.
Just FYI, we
Oh,
got
wow.
Dr. John back.
That sounds very interesting. John, do we have you? Can we hear you?
He was there. He's off mute now.
You
So
well,
that
I told you to unmute him.
if I'm correct on my research and from, of course, your show and your documentation, the murder castle burnt down a few years afterwards, correct?
No, and that's one of the legends and lores of the entire story. There was a fire there, but it didn't burn to the ground as most of the authors write about. Even the one that Scorsese bought the option to had that wrong. The castle, they put the fire out, the castle was rebuilt, and then it was in operation until the 1920s, 1930s, at which time the United States Post Office bought the property with the castle, tore the castle down, and then built the post office off to the side. It's adjacent to, a little bit over on the edge of where the castle was. But they bought that property, tore the castle down, and then built the post office, which still is in operation today in Englewood at 63rd and Wallace. I've been down into the basement there of that post office, which the employees there all believe, not all, but many believe is still haunted.
Be great to get out there and do an investigation out there if possible.
I was just thinking that. We should totally go.
I've told all the ghost hunters in the world, all the ones on TV, I said, if you guys ever want the chance to actually prove the paranormal, let's go down into that basement one day, and you guys bring the pros with me. You bring all the equipment, and let's see if the things come up that came up the first time I went down in that basement. Because I got to tell you, when we went down those steps, my buddy Kim Estes and I, and the post office custodian, which I write about in the book, the door was barricaded. There was no entry into that basement by the post office superintendent. It was disallowed. We got him to move it aside once he found out who I was. We waded through all the cobwebs, just like you see in the movies, went through down into the long tunnels and discovered that there's still some of the original Holmes tunnels down there. And I went down a man who didn't believe. I went down there, Laura, a man who didn't believe in ghosts, the paranormal, the supernatural, anything. When I came back up an hour later, I believed in them all. It was spooky.
Yeah, I definitely think a place like that would definitely have a lot of echoes.
That's
like you think about it, right? A lot of these people thought they were just having a place to stay. From what I understand, it luxurious place. It was a place to go. It was known as the castle. So you think a lot of these people are going there to, rest their head, especially at the World Fair, which you said, like, what the World Fair was like over 10 years long, correct? Not 10 years long, 10 months, right?
No, I think
Six
it was a
months.
couple of years. A couple of years, maybe. I'm not sure
Couple
on the
years?
exact duration.
But it was still a long period of time where they had this fair. So people were coming to this, we're going to rest my head, coming from different countries, different, states. And then their life gets taken so mysteriously, like I like to reflect a movie called The Lost Bones with Mark Wahlberg. And, what happened? The little girl, of course, comes back to not life, but her spirit wanders and gets the attention of the family. So I wonder, like even though the building has been, of course, torn down, if that basement has that connection, like I could imagine the activity, the emotion that you feel down there, because a lot of people lost their lives. Even though it's an unattainable number, because even though Holmes maybe did say it or did not, or never told anybody, he from a single digit to multiple digits, that's still a lot of people that lost their life, like you said. So I can imagine the emotions in that basement for sure.
Well, and I'm hoping that with the tidal wave that's going to come, if Scorsese and DiCaprio make this motion picture about Holmes and America realizing what was in our midst, during the time when Chicago was just exploding as a city. And, the World's Fair at the time, the first electricity, the first Ferris wheel, all these inventors of great things were there. And here's this man walking. You can just imagine the scenes they'd pull off, him walking with his formal outfit, his hat and his mustache. Like you said, Laura, imagine a lion in Africa over the savannah seeing the impala. That's what he would have been watching there at the World's Fair,
literally.
in my mind. And when
he would have.
When this tidal wave comes and America realizes I'm going to petition the federal government to take responsibility for their actions, when they tore that place down and when they filled in that basement without properly investigating the murders that occurred there, that wasn't right. That wasn't proper. That wasn't, and they knew what they were doing. They knew what had happened there before with the murder castle. They knew, and they built that post office now. And I'm going to petition them to allow DePaul University's already contacted me about helping them with an archaeology on the grounds next to the post office. And I got to tell you, wouldn't that be a great television show for one of the channels to put on?
I was just thinking that too. That would be an amazing show.
Yeah, and those people are those are great anthropologists, great archaeologists. They're all pros. I just stand back, and whenever they ask me to step in to make a comment, I would. But then, I'd want it to be a Smithsonian type deal where it's properly investigated and the evidence is actually gone through the right way. Because when we did that exhumation on American Ripper, we didn't do it the right way many, many times. The people involved with me on the show, they all thought it was Holmes before we put the first shovel in the ground. And I think I was the only one there that was actually curious about changing history with the evidence we came up with and the possibility of that and how cool that would be. That's the kind of stuff I love on TV, when there's an actual investigation with scientists, with forensic, testing and lab work, and actually coming up with something that changes history. That's what I like to watch on television. And we didn't handle it that way. And
I'm show that I'm working on. Oh, I was going to say the show that I'm working on is exactly what you're describing. And we're going to be going to do the digs for serial killers and doing the investigation and the science behind everything.
Good. Can you tell me the title?
Oh,
Can you tell me the name of the show? Okay.
Oh, it's being made right now. It's just non-working title.
That you're going about it the right way, and I wish we would have done it that way. That last episode of American Ripper, because anyone that's watched American Ripper has always told me the first 5 or 6 episodes of American Ripper, when we're in London, and the historical recreations and the actor that played Holmes and Jack the Ripper, that was some of the best television made. It was really, really good stuff, and history is to be applauded for the production they came up with. But that last episode, that exhumation, there wasn't a connection going on between the whole team, and it came out. I was very disappointed, and I'm going to make it my next project, my next venture, my next Raiders of the Lost Ark, that I get another cable television network to let me explain to a television audience my interpretation. And I did some evidence work in California trial work. I'd like to have them I'd like to let them have me interpret that evidence we came up with, that and that exhumation. And we're talking DNA, we're talking skeleton physique, we're talking supposed injury from the hanging, all those things that we were all in disagreement about. And then history finally just said, no, this is him, the teeth match. Let's move on. The show's over. And man, they had such a great story in their hands. If we'd have stopped, considered it carefully, and realized this might have been the serious, most incredible con in American history, and this man walked away from his execution. He managed the substitution of the body, which he was a professional at, including Richie over and over again. Right? Oh, there you're all back. And then you started off with a blank check on another life, which, that's, I'd love to have somebody allow me to tell that side of the story and see what we come up with.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that, because this whole time, and I'm going to butcher the last name, so I'm proper me on this, but to me, I think one of the silliest things that H.H. Holmes ever did, maybe it wasn't the silliest thing, maybe it was a set for this con, but when he went to jail, prison for the first time with Marie Hedgewed, right? I think that's how you say her last name. He gets involved with somebody like that. Shouldn't he, if he was that smart of a man, wouldn't he know that eventually it would falter? Like, he killed his partner, then killed 3 of his children. Like, he was always a step ahead. He knew he would, instead of giving this guy $500 or $10,000, whatever, how much ever money, I forget it was, that he was supposed to give. It begins with a P. So P, what is it, Jeff? Sorry, I lost my track. His original partner that began with P, killed 3 of the children.
It's on the tip of
Pitskill or something like that.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
So, but like he eliminates him, and then has him say to his daughter, "Oh, if I appear dead, don't be worried." But then gets involved with Marie, and she rats him out. Like, do you think that was all his ploy? Like, I'm very fascinated about the con, because he was a con artist. He would have got away with it if he didn't get in bed with Mary, and that's what's fascinating to me.
I just want to stop. I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Fill me in.
Jeff, you want to fill her in?
Well,
I'm lost.
Yeah, no, I just had a meeting with a Hollywood group that's interested in my theory and American Rippers, those first 5-6 episodes about Holmes in London and the evidence I have proving he was Jack the Ripper, and they're interested in taking that further. And we got off track a little bit, and we started talking about, Jim, what you brought up about, the trial. It was only one homicide, one charge. All that was on Holmes's behalf. He managed that. He managed where he was arrested. He managed where the trial took place. He knew he'd be found guilty on that. I think. What?
Oh, where was he arrested and where was the trial? I don't know any of this stuff.
Boston, like Jim said, and he was arrested in Boston, and then it was the jurisdiction was Philadelphia, and the trial was there, and then the prison that he went to awaiting execution was Moyamensing in Pennsylvania as well. And that was Holmes' choice. I'm convinced of that. Even during the trial, the Hollywood types were just fascinated with how he fired his lawyers, Laura, and took on his own defense. And every newspaper in the country had a report.
Charged with?
Murder. Homicide.
What was
one murder though?
Well, yeah, I mean, how many counts? Just one murder?
Just
Who
one.
was the one murder? I know who. What's the story?
Oh God! Here, you know what? Let me check it out. You guys keep going. Let me check it out. Marion.
Mary Hedgewood is So Laura, Mary Hedgewood was
Isn't that? I've been doing this for 10 years. Peitzel. His last name was Peitzel.
Peitzel. Yep.
That's the homicide charge.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was his
partner. And that's my fault. I've been doing this for 10 years. So, but it's and they're fascinated with that entire murder trial part to the story, and I got to tell them. So
Mary was the one he was killed for?
No, it was a man.
So was Mary the woman he killed? What?
It was a man. The homicide was over a male.
Petskill, yeah.
Oh, and man. Okay.
Yeah. So Bill Petskill, I believe his name was Bill, basically was his partner in the cons. So basically, Bill opened up, I believe it was insurance office in Philadelphia, and that's how they siphoned some more money. And basically, and Jeff could steal this if I'm wrong, but H.H. Holmes killed him off because he was supposed to pay him money in the scheme. Instead of paying him money, he nixed him, he killed him, he eliminated him, and then he went to prison for an insurance scam. And then he met up with Mary Hedgewood, which was supposed to be his new partner, and she found out everything, and she is the one that ratted him out.
That's a he again, Marion. It's a he.
Oh, is it Marion Hedgewood is the guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he
How
said
did he
that
kill the Bill?
You know what, Laura? You're coming in very disjointed, your audio to me. I'm getting James just fine, but Laura, I'm not. I've had a hard time understanding your questions.
Oh, I said, how did he kill Bill, the partner?
Well, I mean, that's the actual homicide. I don't think was ever actually determined. There were stories, legend, and lore that all the author historians go on and on and on about how he killed Bill Peitzel's children as well, the two girls and the little boy. As far as how he killed Bill, I could look that up again. But you know what? That's not what I'm really involved with Holmes about. You can have an author come on that goes into each determined fact all they want. And basically all it is they go back on Google and research articles about Holmes that some reporter put up in 1890s that when we research now, we find out just there's so many inaccuracies about it. It's almost difficult to claim that's the facts, that's the truth. That's why I was so excited, Laura, about having history allow me to be part of an exhumation and actual evidence about Holmes and holding the bones in my hand. And then having scientists actually compare the handwriting, the Dear Boss, the infamous Jack the Ripper letter with the Holmes handwritings. And they weren't just another Google article. And these were real science tests. These were real archaeologies, anthropologies. And I think that's what you've got to limit yourself to now with Holmes if you want to ever determine the truth about this evil man.
So, the show is called American Ripper, and he has also been titled the Jack the Ripper version in America. So, of course, I know Laura really hasn't heard your theory before because, we've met a long time ago, Jeff. And I think it was actually when Bloodstains first came out. And I think one of the fascinating things is if I watched your TEDx talk, and I followed you throughout the years. So you've of course been a little bit of distance of saying what your theory is or what you've come to find out through your data, through your evidence, through your empirical studies that have occurred. So what are you alluding to? Are you trying to say that Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes were the same individual? Is that what you're trying to say?
I've solved Jack the Ripper. It's H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes wrote the Dear Boss letter. H.H. Holmes murdered Catherine Eddowes. And that's all coming out right now. What all the naysayers and voters are going to find out that all my theory, that I thank you very much for watching my TED Talk. And those concepts that we ran over on American Ripper, that history did a great job, and the producers of the show did a great job portraying on the program. Those are all in some very authoritative hands right now, and I told them, and they've decided to take this challenge. They've got the Dear Boss letter. I don't own it. It's anyone can find it anytime they want to. Google it up on Wikipedia. And they have the Holmes correspondence that matches. And when any audience I go to, Jim, that I tell a story to, in the UK, in America, anywhere, when we put it up on the screen behind me, I've got some Hollywood artists that merge the letters together so that anyone there can see, and they can make up their own mind that this is the same handwriting. And there are experts out there who say it's the same hand. I wasn't the first that had this theory. This theory was alive before I took it on. I just knew from my work in constitutional law that no one was ever going to prove one of the 10 top mysteries in man's history by having an expert say, oh, yeah, that's the same handwriting. That just doesn't work anymore, because you can find another expert anytime you want. I can go to LA and find another expert and say, no, that's not the same. And the Supreme Court discussed this in a couple of their most appreciated decisions about how expert opinion has to be based in scientific fact and testing and the basis for that expert's opinion to be authoritative, to be certified, to be verified. Okay. So, yeah. And Jim, the FBI actually wrote a report about their using handwriting comparison to incriminate suspects in homicide cases, in criminal law. They actually talked about how it had to be done. I took that report and contacted the people that they had identified as the scientists that had put together a computer program at the University of Buffalo, up there close to where you're at. Mm-hmm. And it's called the Cedar Fox. And I talked about it on my TED Talk, and they ran the test. And they came up with a similarity number of 97%. Okay. Yeah. And these scientists, Jim, were very, very afraid of saying, oh my God, he solved Jack the Ripper. Because you saw what happened to History Channel when they brought up Amelia Earhart in that photograph. They almost lost their entire TV network over that photograph scandal fiasco. Mm-hmm. And everybody involved with Jack the Ripper thinks they're very cautious about saying, oh, it's done, it's over. So, but anyway, these same important people, they've taken it from me, and they're going to take their own look at this handwriting comparison. They're going to run it in a much closer diagnostic, they call it. And I think it's over. I think it's over. You have Holmes in London writing the Dear Boss letter, where Jack the Ripper was originated, all right? Where he predicts the next killing, the Catherine Eddowes, where part of the ear is removed. And he talks about it in the letter as upcoming, all right? You had You have three dates, and I just got through explaining this to some executives in New York City. You have 3 dates associated with that letter. You know when the police had it in London. You know when the murder of Catherine Eddowes occurred, and you know when the police gave the letter to the London media. Those 3 dates make it impossible for the author not to have been in London when it was written. So we've already gotten over the step about proving Holmes was there. If he wrote that letter, he was in London. And if he wrote that letter, he killed Catherine Eddowes. It wasn't a journalistic hoax. But then you get into the part, Jim, about how Scotland Yard and how all these author, historian, investigators have had Jack the Ripper completely wrong for so long. It's never been about 1 man, 5 women. There was a copycat involved. There were 2, maybe 3 killings, and the London news media bears the responsibility for what happened. They put it across their headlines to sell newspapers, and it generated this sick attention. I was hoping the doctor could jump in on this part. I would have loved to hear what he said about this. But these killers watching these headlines and all the interest that was coming up over those headlines. And it's going to be interesting to see how the world digests, Jim, what I'm trying to say I've solved and proved now. And then when you have the FBI say, yeah, that's who wrote that letter, I think it's going to be amazing to watch what happens afterward.
Yeah, no, I think we've just lost everybody. What the heck?
I have you, Jim, loud and clear.
Tonight's a weird night for sure.
I'm having a good time. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, what's it called? So I lost my train of thought because I can't believe the technical difficulties tonight. But so with the copycat killers in London, would you say that the way, because it's really hard to attribute to how H.H. Holmes killed people, right? How because he was so good at doing so. So why would you think that he would leave these people behind in London that were discovered?
It's not. I believe he killed 1. Okay. 1. And my evidence of that, Jim, is, and I enjoy going on shows like yours and getting to voice this opinion. When you look at 3 and 4 of the Canon 5, the Ripper 5, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, history has long time assumed Elizabeth Stride was killed by Jack the Ripper, but they have no evidence of that whatsoever. They can't even determine it was done by the same hand that night, or if it was even possible that the killer killed Elizabeth Stride and then ran across town and an hour later killed Catherine Eddowes in a way that the autopsy reports state he showed tremendous medical knowledge and a medical skill with his handling of the knife. All right. That's never been identified. That's never been verified. That's never been certified. Nothing that would hold up in a court of law, Jim. And then when you look at number 5, the Mary Kelly killing, that has absolutely no similarity whatsoever to the previous murders. It's a woman that was butchered inside her room at her apartment. And it wasn't like the other killings at all. And I've always wondered, had a lawyer had to take that Mary Kelly into court and try to identify that as part of the Ripper 5, the only thing he would have had, Jim, was that it occurred in Whitechapel and it occurred within a month. But there was no MO similarity. There's never been one. And I always enjoy, what history did over 134 years, Jim, they knew that Dear Boss was different. They knew that Catherine Eddowes was different. And what they tried to say was, that was a journalistic hoax. It wasn't the same as the other letters. And it wasn't. It wasn't at all. But I'll tell you something happened to me in London while we were producing American Ripper.
Yeah, please.
I was there. We were there after filming all day long, staying in a beautiful hotel, and the film crew was down in the fire pit planning the next day's shoot. And they'd asked me, as they always did, to go up and have a cocktail so they could work on the shoot. So I'm up at the bar, and I told the producers this. I told history this. I was approached by two gentlemen in suits. They identified themselves as Scotland Yard. They told me they'd been watching the production. They were interested in what was going on. They weren't ready to agree with my theory at all, but they did want me to say, know that Scotland Yard had for a long time believed that there had been multiple killers. Mm-hmm. It hadn't been one man, 5 women.
Yeah.
And now you're getting into the point, Jim. Does Hollywood, do all these authors, does history even want that known? Because you're pretty much eliminating it from the top 5 mysteries of all time, the coldest cold case ever, all those things.
Yeah.
Jack the Ripper kind of slides away into the trash heap of history when you think about it.
Yeah, and then there's a whole community over there, and that is apparent. It's like going to Roswell and seeing aliens, or going to Salem and seeing witches. You go over there in that certain area, it's Jack the Ripper, right? You've been there. You can attest to that.
Oh yeah.
So it's like its calling sign. Like, you're getting rid of a legend. If we say aliens don't exist, then UFO, Roswell dimmers, which of course, witches are a debatable thing beside religion. Salem would falter away through its height. So I can understand why, especially historians, primary sources, secondary sources. But one thing people don't understand about history, the history is conceived by humanity, right? We don't know really what happened 1,000 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, because we weren't alive then. There's no primary source that we can dictate by, because the people that were alive during Jack the Ripper's killings, if it was multiple killings by the same person or individualized killings by copycats, nobody's alive. Yeah, we have records from investigators, but that investigator is no longer alive either. We cannot simply ask and say, hey, was this true? So history is determinable. Like, it helps us determine things, but it's not set in fact. And that's one thing people don't understand about history. It's very debatable. And it's, especially back in the day, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago.
What about Jesus Christ? No, yeah. We'll never know what actually happened there. We'll never know.
We know he existed, but we don't know the full dynamics of it. We know Jack the Ripper existed in some form, but was it H.H. Holmes, or was Jack the Ripper an individual that copycatted one of those killings?
Well, and that's what I'm doing right now, Jim, and shows like yours are helping me out. Okay. And I thank you. Yeah. I thank you to the bottom of my heart. But we now have a piece of direct forensic evidence, of which the Supreme Court said was the type they had to see to make a decision like this. Okay. Yep. We now have a forensic comparison by computer of the Dear Boss letter and the Holmes correspondence. All right.
Yeah.
Which they're admitting was over 97% similarity. And let me explain to you what 97% means, all right?
That's a high percentage.
Jim, yes. If I had you write 2 letters now and we sent them to the same program for comparison, I doubt we'd get 97%. That's how close this handwriting is. If I showed it, well, you saw my TED Talk.
I did. Yes, I saw your analysis. I saw the analysis. Yes.
You saw how we put the vote. We put the vote to 3,500 people in that audience, and we came up with 80% that said, "Yeah, that's the same. It's obvious. Look at it." And it's even the London police.
Yeah. And on top of it, too, I see the portrait. The portrait of H.H. Holmes, and what people observed during that time, that individual that was around there, and how you were able to overlap them, and the cheek structure, the bone, it was pretty darn close, I would have to say. And I'm a science kind of guy, and like as I know, it's hard for a lot of people to swallow some of what you say, because I think people are so understanding of certain perspectives. But your TEDx talks, for once, and if people haven't watched that, please go look it up. Fantastic. I know there was some mic issues that were happening, but in the retrospect of it, though, what you proved, what you shown, was still very fascinating for sure. And I really look forward to you kind of going more down that rabbit hole, and even though maybe it'll never be cemented or into history, because like you said, people are scared of eliminating. It's like trying to saying the Zodiac killer was multiple different people, copycats, right? That's in that same retrospect. It's in that same respect that if you would Jack the Ripper from history, what it would do to especially serial killer individuals, true crime individuals, right?
Well, and think about it. Almost every human alive today, Jim, that speaks English, and many that don't speak English, know what the phrase Jack the Ripper means. Yeah. It's one of those highly identifiable phrases. And here, if, like you say, we eliminate it from history by proving that this was a man playing with the London police, fooling with the London news media, who would then bear responsibility for what was going on. And we have, for the first time in 134 years, Jim, real evidence of identity that would stand up in a court of law, the first ever. Except your BBC, the BBC composite of the face was excellent. That was an excellent composite done by the BBC, and my hat's off to them for that, because it looks very similar to Holmes. That's not something you could get. That's not something you could get a conviction in court over, but it's something you could circumstantially use that it resembled Holmes and his physique, his bone structures, the whole thing. But so now we get to the point, Jim. Now we get to the issue, which I think has been there all along. And I'm negotiating right now with another television network if they want to do this. Now we're to the point whether television, literature, law enforcement, London law enforcement, particularly the Scotland Yard, the London news media, if they all want me to prove what I'm saying is true or not.
Yeah. That's a hard one, because you could be suppressed by them, and it could never come out, I think that's a fascinating thing, Jeff. Like, it shows you how much people have control of certain things, and I think one of the important things about what you're talking about is of course, how one of the killings were, right? It seemed like it was done by a surgeon or a doctor or somebody that was skilled in using a scalp, right?
One of them was.
Yeah.
One of them. The others weren't.
They were brutal, right? They were brutally murdered.
The last one was a butchery. Yeah. The last one was terrible, and it wasn't like Holmes at all.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he could have taken a different tact or path. I don't know. I just don't think that stands up. Yeah. And when you read the autopsy, the Catherine Eddowes autopsy report, and their description of the man they think was that killer and what his knowledge and education and training was, you'll see that's right down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I hear too. I definitely hear that there. I think people get the big five, as you say, mixed together, because they were definitely killed differently. And I think people want to lump them together, but there definitely was differences, and you could tell either the way of killing the individuals were different because that person wanted to replicate something different in their killings, which has happened with serial killers. They've killed people different ways because of fantasies in their head that they want to play out. But Holmes wasn't really ever about that. Like like you said perfectly at the beginning, he eliminated people that were in his way, right? Or he also was a womanizer too. He also had multiple wives and multiple fiancées, but that was also because he wanted their life insurance, right? He did seduce them and then kill them, but like, what out of all that, why do you think, though, he left that body behind? Why do you think he didn't get rid of that body like he did every other single body?
Well, you got to remember, he always had that check in his pocket with London. Yeah. All he had to do was buy a ticket home and leave it all behind.
Sure.
And, back then in the 1880s, there was no way to track it. There was no way to follow him to Chicago. Well, there was, but very difficult. Yeah, I mean, they couldn't even identify one face on a suspect in London for decades.
Yeah.
To follow a man across the Atlantic on another liner and then, to Chicago and then arrest him for the murder of Elizabeth Stride is not going to have happened. It didn't, obviously.
Yeah, but, sure. Makes sense.
And he knew that was in his back pocket, and he bought a ticket and went home.
Well, Jeff, we're going to be on a little bit longer, but Laura's not here. Is there anything else you would like to add? Like, I hate to do this to you, but I know Laura had a bunch of questions, and I don't know what her questions were to ask you. So, I know a lot about what you present, and so this is kind of like an open platform for you, because I was more wanting a discussion tonight, and it has been, and I really appreciate your time. But is there anything else you would like to add before we head off into the sunset?
Hey, Jim, don't sell yourself short. You did an excellent job, and it's I think our listeners, if they want to know about the issue, will realize that while I can't prove anything right now, absolutely, that with who I am, there's going to be an effort to establish what I've shown is what actually happened in history, and it's going to be fun to see what happens. But as far as right now, what I'm doing, I'm revising my book. My book is 11 years old, and it was written before, Jim, all the archaeologies, the anthropologies, the handwriting comparisons, 5 television shows that I've been on, and all the thousands, hundreds of shows like yours I've gone on with great questions from hosts that are knowledgeable hosts, and then all the comments from my fans, all those things. I'm trying to incorporate some of that stuff into a revision right now, and I'm going to be done in 2 or 3 weeks. I've got a new website out now, and it's called buck29.com. It's not worth going to right now. I've got a group of guys creating a new website for me with a blog, so that I can start keeping people on track of how we're doing on this. And then when my revision's done, Jim, I'm going to be offering Bloodstains again ebook, and it's going to be the price of a cup of coffee for all your listeners. Just basically to cover my costs, because of this inflation and this economy. I want to be the first one to actually step up and say, I'm not going to charge you guys more. Now, it has to be an ebook. I'm sorry, because there's no way you can print a book now for less than $5, $6, $7 a book, and then all the shipping and all. And before you know it, Jim, you're $17 and you haven't made a nickel.
Yeah.
And you know what? People don't have that right now. So I'm going to be offering an ebook for the price of a cup of coffee, and it'll include all these discoveries I've made this last 11 years, and like shows like tonight. And I'm hoping some of your fans and your listeners will support me on this, and then we can show some of the Hollywood people that Holmes was in London. There's evidence establishing he committed one of the murders. And if they want to tell the world the truth and rewrite 134 years of wrongness, we've got a great chance now. And it's going to be fun to stand back and see if they're willing to do it.
Well, I'm excited for your journey, and I look forward to reading the revision to Bloodstains. I also look forward to the many more adventures you have. And Jeff, I appreciate you being on tonight. Thank you so much. And everybody, if you weren't able to watch tonight, please listen into Apple Music, Spotify, and all the other great places that this will also show on. So Jeff, have a great night. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, bye.